Long before humans built cities, wrote books, or invented the internet, they were already telling stories. Thousands of years ago, after the day's hunting was finished, small groups gathered around campfires. There were no movies, no phones, and no television. Yet people still spent hours listening to stories. This happened across every continent and every generation. Why? Why are humans so fascinated by stories? Why do we become emotionally attached to fictional characters, imaginary worlds, and events that never happened? The answer may be much older than entertainment. Stories may have helped humans survive. Imagine living 30,000 years ago. There were no schools, no books, and no written language. Everything a tribe knew existed only in memory. A dangerous river, a hunting technique, a poisonous plant, a predator's territory. Knowledge was essential, but facts alone were easy to forget. Stories were not. A lesson hidden inside a story became easier to remember and easier to pass on. Through stories, important survival information could survive for generations. In many ways, stories became humanity's first storage system. Long before books stored knowledge, long before computers stored information, humans stored wisdom inside stories. And that simple ability may have helped shape the success of our entire species. But stories did more than preserve information. They changed the way humans think. The human brain does not naturally remember lists of facts very well. Numbers fade, instructions disappear. Random information is easily forgotten. Stories are different. A story has characters, conflict, emotion, a beginning and an ending. And the brain seems to love that structure. Even today, people often remember a story years after forgetting the facts that surrounded it. This is because the human mind naturally organizes reality into narratives. We do not simply remember events. We remember stories about events. In many ways, the human brain thinks in stories. And that ability gave humans another remarkable advantage. Stories allowed people to learn from experiences they never personally lived through. Imagine listening to a hunter describe an encounter with a predator. You were never there. Yet your brain can still learn from it. The danger becomes part of your knowledge without becoming part of your life. Stories became survival simulations. A safe way to experience risk. A safe way to explore consequences. A safe way to prepare for the future. Long before humans created schools, stories were already teaching lessons. Long before humans built laboratories, stories were already running experiments inside the imagination. Perhaps that is why stories remain so powerful today. Because every time we hear a story, the brain is still doing what it has always done. Learning from lives other than our own. And perhaps nowhere was the power of stories more visible than around the campfire. For ancient humans, daytime was filled with survival, hunting, gathering food, avoiding danger. But when night arrived and the fire was lit, something remarkable happened. People gathered together, they spoke, they listened. They shared experiences. Around those small circles of light, stories became more than information, they became connection. A story could make an entire group laugh together, fear together, hope together. For a few moments, dozens of separate minds entered the same imagined world. And that shared experience helped strengthen the tribe itself. But stories did something even deeper. They created identity. A tribe was not just a collection of people living in the same place. It was a collection of people who believed the same stories. Stories about where they came from. Stories about their ancestors. Stories about what was right and wrong. Stories about who belonged and who did not. Over time, these shared narratives became the foundation of culture. In many ways, humans do not simply share territory, they share stories. Even today, nations are held together by historical narratives. Families are held together by shared memories. Communities are held together by common beliefs. The stories change. But the pattern remains the same. Because stories do more than entertain human beings. They help human beings become part of something larger than themselves. But perhaps the most fascinating thing about stories is that the brain often reacts to them as if they were real. People cry when a fictional character dies. They feel fear during a movie. They celebrate victories that never actually happened. Logically, we know these events are imaginary. Yet emotionally, they can feel surprisingly real. Why? Because the human brain appears to care less about whether a story is factual and more about whether it contains emotional truth. Stories allow us to experience love, loss, courage, failure, and hope without living through every situation ourselves. The characters may be fictional, but the emotions are not. And that emotional experience shapes us. In many ways, stories help humans understand something even more important than the world. They help humans understand themselves. Every person carries a story inside their mind. A story about who they are, where they came from, what they believe, and who they hope to become. Identity itself may be a form of storytelling. Humans make sense of their lives by turning experiences into narratives. The past becomes a story. The future becomes a story. Even our dreams are often stories we tell ourselves. Perhaps that is why stories remain so powerful. Because they do not simply describe reality, they help create meaning. And without meaning, the human experience would feel far more difficult to understand. The remarkable thing is that modern humans are still surrounded by stories. Movies, books, television, podcasts, video games, even social media. Every day, people willingly enter imaginary worlds created by other minds. But stories influence far more than entertainment. Nations are built upon shared histories. Religions are built upon shared narratives. Families pass down stories across generations. Entire cultures are held together by ideas that exist because people continue telling the same stories to one another. In many ways, civilization itself runs on narrative. Humans do not simply share land, they share meaning. And meaning is often carried through stories. Perhaps that brings us back to the campfire where this journey began. Thousands of years ago, humans gathered around small flames beneath the night sky. They told stories to survive. They told stories to teach. They told stories to connect. And over time, those stories became something even greater. They became a way to understand life itself. Perhaps the reason humans love stories is simple. Stories helped us survive, then they helped us belong. And eventually, they helped us understand who we are. Because humans may be the only species that not only lives in reality, but also lives inside stories. And perhaps that is one of the most human things about us.